was the last time you watched a video, listened to a podcast, read an article or a book, and you left feeling good about the things that you were doing, about the effort you were putting into your daily life, about your work, about how you were being a parent to your kids, about how you were approaching your school or your craft? My guess is not for a while. And what I have seen, what I've experienced with an overwhelming majority of the content I consume via YouTube or an article or a book, a podcast, the majority of it goes something like this. You're doing this wrong, and if you don't turn around now, you're going to regret it later, and probably not much later, and it's going to be devastating, right? And I'll be honest, I used to buy into this system. I used to scour out ways that I was not doing something correctly in my life. But then I realized as the years passed that the amount of content surrounding these corrections, these Armageddon-like problems that this content was arguing we were asleep to, it just grew immensely, that the overwhelming majority of whatever I consumed was this negative, you are doing something wrong, right? From, your shoelaces are not eco-friendly enough, to you're not washing your sheets right, to, everything you thought about this is completely wrong. And the funniest field where I find this in is actually nutrition, because if any of you have studied nutrition or tried to implement diets into your life, there's like 1,000 different experts saying some of the same things and many of the opposite things, and saying it in such dramatic ways to make you think, if you had just heard one of them, wow, I really screwed this up. And this approach to our learning, to your and my, the influence that we subject ourselves to, has become extremely problematic. So today's video is on delayed gratification, and how delayed gratification is not torment. And the reason that I bring up the content to begin with is because the vast majority of this bombardment of these podcast videos, articles, etc., have this underlying message to them. And it usually has to do with something about you, about you're not disciplined enough, you're not sacrificing enough, something about a deficiency in your willingness to work hard. And on the other side of that, if you listen to a lot of this content, which I have, especially when I was a little bit younger in college, trying to build up my life, trying to improve myself, as I think everyone should try. But as I was doing that with this content, it became less about self-improvement and like, I'm excited to improve this part of my life, but about let's turn all the guns facing my life and blow up everything that I've learned or that I've valued, because so-and-so on the internet has said you're doing it wrong. And the deeper problem there, though, becomes about self-condemnation. When you expose yourself enough to enough voices that are dividing you and dividing your idea of what you should do with your day, with your life, with your values, it starts to tear you apart, because this voice starts to grow louder of like, okay, what am I not doing right? What did I think I was doing right that I'm not doing right? This kind of clickbait, self-undermining approach creates this voice in our mind that is so self-destructive and so self-condemnatory that we're left with nothing to stand on. And the irony of it all, at least I think it's ironic, that these people who are voicing things in this way of, you're doing this wrong, you're not sacrificing enough, you're not disciplined enough, they, if you look at their lives, a lot of them do not have their lives together either. And then it becomes a question about authority of like, why did I even listen to that person to begin with, right? So that's one problem. We're not going to tackle that much today. More today is about this messaging that we receive. And if you look into any self-improvement book, especially the ones motivated more by psychology, philosophy, someone like Jordan Peterson, for example, even with someone like Peterson, right, it can be someone who I have a lot of respect for. It can be a bit much with kind of the overwhelming messaging of you are not XYZ, you are not disciplined enough. Someone like Jocko Willink, who I also have, immense respect for, still kind of the same thing. His whole brand's around one thing of just grind harder, right? You have all these excuses, don't care about them, blah blah blah. I don't want to bastardize his messaging, but that's how I feel when I expose myself up to a lot of his content, right? And I think that means something. So today's video is about the underlying mechanism, as I see it, that all of these educators are pointing to, whether they know it or not, and that is about delayed gratification. So I was gonna end the video with what's down here, but I think I need to start with it instead. If you are unmotivated, if you are sitting on the couch, scrolling on your phone when you should be doing homework or working or whatever 1,000 things you could or should be doing, the messaging we've received leads us to believe that, you know what, I'm a lazy bum. I'm a lazy fill in the blank with whatever derogatory language comes to mind. And that is sort of the implicit push of these educators that, you know what, you aren't special, that you should regard yourself kind of in relation to your performance of, if you're not disciplined, then you're a schmuck, right? And before I jump into that, I do want to point out that there is some value in this, because I think it's a response to a broader cultural conversation that you and I were raised with, which is, the culture of participation awards. If you get praise just because you're you, right? And I think intuitively we know that's not true, and we've also seen some of the destructive elements of that, right? So I don't want to say that these messages that you shouldn't feel happy if you're sitting there doing nothing, that there isn't any validity to that. There absolutely is, but it is so harsh and so toxic to just be berated with that constantly that I think a lot of people are trying their best. I really do. And to fill someone's mind with this thought of, for a time when they're sitting down or relaxing or doing something, maybe not productive, that there's something wrong with them, that is a very thin ice, thin road that you as a voice in their lives are walking, because on either side of that road is destruction. So where I was going with this, with bringing these points up here, is it becomes, when we internalize these messages, it becomes about our own battle with our own insufficiencies. And of course, we are rampant with insufficiencies when measured against some ideal tyrannical standard that, not even the most elite people in the world can always measure up to, right? So before we move forward with this, I want to lay this one test out of, if you have people in your life that you're influenced by, that maybe you're a little envious of, one of the things I would say is that, if that spotlight is focused on you and their voice is looking down at you, if you can take a moment and turn that light around and look closely into their lives, right? Whether it's a philosopher or a guru or a financial advisor or a nutritionist or a political figure. If you turn that light back to them and ask, hey, are the same things that you are telling me now, did you integrate that into your life? And if so, how's that going for you? And what you're going to find is that a lot of these people, their lives are not so great, are not so attractive, are not so envious, are not so enviable after all, right? And I think this exercise can be a step towards freedom, of loosening the tentacles of our own kind of self-condemnatory nature, loosening some of those by getting rid of some of the voices who are in our minds that shouldn't be there. And one of the ways to do this is to turn that light around and say, how's that working out for you? And oftentimes it's not. All right, now into the meat of this video. We're talking about excellence, we're talking about success, right? And delayed gratification is perhaps the most important tool, the most important character trait to get to that point, right? Now, one of the reasons I'm doing this video is because I think delayed gratification has become synonymous with suffering, with self-denial, with just feeling like you can never get what you want. And it's not true. In fact, I think delayed gratification, I think all it is changing your fuel source, right? It's almost like switching your body into ketosis, where you're running on a lower heat but much more sustaining, much more fulfilling fuel. And earlier when I mentioned the person on the couch sitting there feeling lazy, scrolling on their phone, lost in some escapism or some pleasure, right? The question for me that comes to mind is not, how lazy are you on a scale of 1 to 10? How worthless are you on a scale of 1 to 10? It's, do you feel exhausted? Do you feel weary? Because I think a lot of our behavior that would be judged by others as lazy is exhaustion, is weariness. But the other side of that coin is also motivation. Now, you can make an argument that laziness is not an actual thing, that it's just a lack of incentive. Well, I think there's some merit to that. And when we look at that person on the couch sitting there playing their games, whatever, vaping or whatever they do, if our first thought, especially if it's towards ourselves or others, is to a dismissal, a condemnation of that person, we miss a vital opportunity to understand when we find ourselves in that same situation, how we got there and how to move forward in spite of, this cloud of numbing, basically. So we'll come back to this motivation in a moment. For now, I want to zoom into delayed gratification. And one of the obstacles with it is the fear associated with delaying, right? If I could get a thing now, and I know that object A or experience A will feel good, or I could push away from A for now and pursue pursuit B or experience B, but I won't know whether that's going to pay off till later. There's an implicit fear there, right? This fear versus faith of, first of all, I don't want to miss out on A. Second of all, I don't want to go through all this not experiencing A, get to B and realize B wasn't as good as it was advertised, right? Now this is a fear. This is kind of for the most part, an illusion in our minds that, the immediate thing that's certain is better than a longer term thing that's uncertain. And I believe this faith versus fear goes back to a concept I talked about in the first video of outcomes and processes. I believe that when you choose experience A over B because of the fear of losing A, right, and going through to B, going through to school, going through whatever experience, that when you settle for the short-term gratification, it's often a result of the fear of the outcome not being good, of missing out, right? Regret and the fear of a bad consequence, right? In the first video, though, I talked about processes over outcomes, faith in the process, and surrendering the outcome. We know that if we can become the type of person who consistently chooses the more meaningful path, and sometimes that meaningful path does mean indulging in some immediate things. But if we can become the type of person who consistently has a higher aim and pursues that and lets go of the immediate things that they could grab onto, we know instinctively that person's going to be better off, regardless of if one or two times along the way it didn't work out as well as they had hoped, right? So in my analysis of this, it really comes down to when we fear missing out, right, which is the kryptonite of delaying our gratification. Are we focused on the outcome or the process? And the process being the daily habits, the daily choices, the daily systems that we use to progress. Are we abandoning that for chasing a specific outcome? Because, we can talk logically about this, which doesn't always translate in the moment, I understand, but which person do you think is going to be more successful in the end? The one who devotes to the faith in their process, the faith in their commitment to growing. Or the person who abandons what they've learned and through fear chases the outcome, chases the good feeling, the pleasure, no matter the cost, right? And that's what not delaying gratification will teach you, is that the outcome is all that matters. I just need to feel good. I just need to get what I want when I want it, right? And to me, using the process is synonymous with faith versus focusing on the outcome, and only the outcome through fear is to be captivated by the fear of missing out. Using using our faith in the process, in devoting to what we do daily, what we do weekly, that is going to lead to a lot more gratification in the end than through fear of being motivated only by outcomes and by chasing towards specific feelings. So zooming in again here to delayed gratification, we can find some freedom just even in the words themselves. Delayed gratification doesn't mean no gratification. It doesn't mean you're, in aesthetic, living a monastic life out in the wilderness. It just means one of two things, often both. It means not yet. We don't get that yet. Or B, on the journey of delayed gratification, in the steps itself, are a lot of enjoyment and pleasure and fulfillment that you cannot even conceive of when you're just grabbing whatever treat is around you, right? So delay does not mean extinguish. It does not mean to go to war with your desires exactly. Though sometimes there are some days where you have to fight a little harder, sure. But it just means pushing it out. But I really think it means, like I said earlier, switching your fuel source. More on that in a minute. So I want to drive this point home just one more time. What have we been taught? And it's usually this binary extremist thinking that A, you're a lazy schmuck with no prospects, and B, you need to grind and self-deny all your needs, all your desires in order to get there, right? To me, I believe that's the underlying messaging of the content that is out there that is being pushed on so many people. It's you're useless, and you know what? You need to work yourself to exhaustion, to internal breakdown before you can be someone who's even approaching the horizon of worthiness. And that's bullshit. It doesn't work. And I talked about this light test here. Those people who are living like that, turn that light back to most of them, and you will find a lot more destruction, a lot more strife than you might imagine. Now, I grant that some people are just extremely high performers, extremely proficient in their ability to self-regulate, even in spite high stressful situations. We're not all Superman. I get that. But this is not good enough. That you're lazy and that you need to work yourself to death. There's not really a lot of words for that. Instead, I propose a reconsideration. Productivity is amazing. Productivity is important. Learning to optimize your life, learning to optimize your work habits, your life habits, parenting, playtime, leisure, important stuff, right? But productivity has been stitched to these other words. And I think for a moment, we can unstitch it. So the reconsideration that I am advocating for is what I'm going to call the Tao of delayed gratification. And if you've read the Tao Te Ching, really fascinating, strange little book, it talks about these universal patterns of give and take, inhaling, exhaling, light and dark, right? And what we are fed in terms of the recommendations for our productive lives is all just go, 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 go. It's either, it can either be this lazy and grinding, or it can also be extreme, that our vision of success is extremely hedonistic, to buy whatever we want, when we want, and experience however many, enjoyments we want to. If you take those extremes, meet them somewhere in the middle, and then add something else here, rest. I think that is the proper counterbalance between this grind culture that also accuses you of being a lazy, worthless schmuck, right? Now, the test for this is how many people do you think who are these influencers, these teachers, really value and teach rest as a necessary and vital part of life? I think rest is one of the big missing pieces here. They may talk about taking some time off or, et cetera, et cetera. But I think human beings need a lot of rest and a lot of leisure. Now, throughout history, maybe we weren't always able to afford the leisure that we are blessed with the opportunity to have in a more affluent culture. But, most humans need 8 hours of sleep a day. That's a third of their life, a third of their years spent sleeping. That's a lot of sleeping. This toxic belief that if you want to be good at something, you need to sleep 2 hours a night, and if you're not always working on your thing, then it's just, I swear it's straight from the devil. It really is, because look at the consequences. Look at the people who have just destroyed themselves, and I have been on that path of self-destruction, and I imagine you have too, of this constant self-condemnation. I'm just going to keep saying that word because I think that's the word. So my advocation here is to, we have work, we have leisure, we have the grind, right? And good, but we need rest too. And leisure and rest share some areas, right? But we need to exhale. And we don't just need to exhale, we need to recover. Just like when we work out, right? If someone who works out intensely every day, maybe twice a day, their body's going to break down. And our job in life is not to just sit on the accelerator until it goes dead. It's to move with it, right? It's this give and take. It's this Tao. It's this in and out. And I think if we can just move a few percentage points towards this direction of rest, man, will it make a big difference. So I think it's strange for most people to associate delayed gratification with rest. But what I have seen is that when people are lazy or unmotivated, they are exhausted and their purpose has been dissolved under them, okay? So things are not what they seem. And I think this when we take a Taoist view of work and rest, it opens up the path to, of course I need to rest. And I'll tell you what, when you rest and when you restore your body and when you rejuvenate, you're going to have some great ideas that you were not going to have when you were at the grindstone, right? Okay, moving to the last portion here, we're talking about motivation. We just talked about rest and about these lazy people being exhausted. And the other part is motivation, okay? In my mind, the very clear and obvious and powerful solution to people who are lazy is, hey, they don't care, okay? The question I would ask, if you're a parent or a young person and you're trying to get yourself or someone else to, get after it some more, do you think that person's lazy or are they apathetic? And maybe those are synonymous in some ways. But what I've seen, as I talked about in the first video and in the last video, my generation is entombed by apathy for a variety of reasons. And apathy is a dissolving of purpose. It's a dissolving of why, of something that instills fire in you. It's not easy to just start up our purpose again, of choose something and run with that to the wind. It takes time to build that fire, and it takes time to see who we are in relation to what we're going after. And I'll let that rest for now, because I think purpose is really challenging to talk about directly. I may say one more thing about it though. But regarding a solution, when we talk about delayed gratification, it's not torment. It is the pleasure of aiming at something high and far away and pursuing that thing, knowing that is more valuable than the things right around us, right? And some points here, again, kind of this Taoist cycle in and out, right? Is these four pieces of whatever we're pursuing: education, our work, our family life, maybe we're starting a business, whatever it may be. we have to learn about, right? We have to educate ourselves. We have to read, we have to listen, we have to ask questions. We have to, I think most of all, when we learn, we need to internalize it. We need to make it our own, right? Because the danger here, just like this danger kind of draping over this whole video, is when you give the authority of your life over to some influencer, even if they're well qualified and an educator, great. If you do that, you sever your self-confidence in your own ability to fix the problems in your life. And I'm not saying we should only rely on what we think or what we feel, but maybe those people who do not know the idiosyncrasies of your life, maybe they shouldn't be more of a potent voice in your life than your own decisions, right? But we need to learn, right? And then when we learn, we need to do. We need to practice. We need to write. We need to exercise. Whatever we're pursuing, right? We need to show up for work if we're, going for that career move. So we need to learn. We need to practice. We need to reflect. And this is in part of what I mentioned with the self-analysis after the learning. How did things go? What didn't work? What worked? How do I feel about it? How's my motivation? Am I rested, right? So learning, practice, reflection, rest. Rest is disengagement. It's letting it be for an hour, 5 minutes, a day, a week, a month, a year. I have multiple examples in my life of a time where I wrote something, a piece, a story, whatever, and I put it away, and I came back to it years later, and it was like a new artifact that I had so much rejuvenated energy to engage with again. So rest is about letting go, and reflection is a good transition movement, but between gripping something hard and practicing, and then reflection allows it facilitates that letting go. So how did your week go? How did it, did you set some goals for the week? Did you meet those goals? The ones that you didn't meet, too difficult, right? We reflect, we think about it, we feel through it for a few minutes, and then suddenly this letting go becomes a lot easier, right? And then after we are done resting, we pick it up again with some learning, with some practice, and some more reflection, right? So I have a word here, ambition. One of the biggest dangers I've seen in my generation is when they have enough to be comfortable and they let the ambition dry up and they just stagnate. And they may have, enough money, whatever, to live life at this static pace. But my advocacy here at the Performance Philosopher is to have something in your life that drives you forward. And the only real answer, I think, and to me this is the bottom answer for delayed gratification, is identity. If I am someone who sacrifices for the better, I don't need to think about it. I don't need to ask whether I have this, I have the character for it or not. I already am that person. And we're going to talk about that more. But when we are the person who is willing to sacrifice for something so awesome and so fulfilling, so meaningful, it's not a hard choice. It just emerges naturally. Yes, there are sacrifices to make along the way. There are difficult choices to make along the way. But it is much easier if you are the type of person who walks that path than if you have to act outside of yourself. And to me, when I talked about this spotlight, looking around at people influencing us, at some point though, we also turn that back around and say, who am I? If we're trying to move from apathy to convicted motivation, it has to come from your identity, right? So let me know down below what has worked for you. I'm very curious if you who are watching this, what your relationship with delayed gratification is, how it has been, how it's evolving. Because to me, this is the most important, as I said, the most important character trait for the pursuit of excellence in anything, right? So let me know. Thank you for coming. I'm so glad you were here to watch this, and more to come. We'll see you guys next time.